forgetting about science. So you could accuse my religious values and cite them for my feelings, but I also have just proposed some inconvenient truths to this debate. Now, from the next thing you wrote, Carlos, is the Catholic Church has greatly hurt the abortion issue because they insist on not using protective measures like condoms. Okay. Remember, the Catholic Church is a worldwide body. It's not, and it's just like when I talked about abortion, I specifically mentioned the United States because the Catholic Church, when they write the catechism of the Catholic Church and the doctrines, that applies to Catholics worldwide. It doesn't apply to Western Catholics this way, or Catholics in China this way, or Catholics in Africa this way. Okay? So the Catholic Church can never endorse, at least from doctrinally speaking, the distribution of condoms, or contraception of any kind, or abortion. Okay, because before you have any of that, you have the sexual act, which the Catholic Church insists, the Catholic religion insists should only occur between a man and a woman during a marriage, and for the building of a family, bring children into the world. So, it's easy to say that the Catholic Church has hurt the abortion issue because of their stance on condoms, but the reality is, and this is, you mentioned the AIDS-riddled Africa and the poor in Africa. There's all kinds of people out there throwing condoms at Africans, and in a lot of studies it's shown that they're not using them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they engage in more risky behavior because they're wearing condoms, because they are under the assumption that this condom is going to prevent everything, and it doesn't. Condoms are only they're very effective, but they're not 100% effective. And then there's the contraceptive aspect of the pill and other things, Depo-Provera, that people take to prevent pregnancies. Well, I've spoken, this is my experience speaking to a lot of women that use these things. Right now, actually, Depo is very common. And they'll tell me about some of their liaisons, and there's no condoms in there. So, they're not getting pregnant because of Depo-Provera, but they're not protecting themselves from the diseases either. So, this goes back to what I was saying about respecting the sexual act. If you want to prevent the disease, if you want unplanned pregnancy, or you don't want a pregnancy to occur, show restraint. That's something where I say human beings can solve this problem, because if we have the capability to make choices every day, some good, some bad, this is another one. You could choose to restrain yourselves and not just engage in sexual relations just because you feel like it, just because you want to, or you think it would be cool. Men, and to be fair, men probably have a much more a bigger challenge in some ways, but also they have a much bigger responsibility to respect this, because I'm sure there are women out there that are soliciting men in nightclubs or just in relations in general, but then again, men are out there probably doing it just as much, if not more. There are other ways to keep your testosterone in check, and I'm not talking about masturbation. I'm talking about going out and working out, going to the gym, eating healthy foods. There are ways to control these things. And like I said, I'm using science and nature to make a point here. I'm not just throwing at you a doctrine of the Christian Catholic Church. And I keep saying Catholic Christian because we're gonna touch on that in a few minutes, because I'm gonna make a point about some of the things you wrote in here. Now, granted, I'm sure you may have had constraints, the typing, and I said emails are subject to interpretation, but some of the information you borrowed and what you send in the email has made me feel that I have to clarify something. He said family planning is not realistic for all peoples. I'm glad you used the term peoples because, I can agree with that. It's not realistic for all peoples in the sense that, it does require education. It does require knowledge. It does require moral consideration. And, some people may say, well, you're just going to say that the Catholic Church is the answer to that. Well, no, I'm not. What I'm going to say, though, is that Catholic teachings, on family planning are not morally bad. They're not a bad thing. I mean, to say to insist that people restrict this to marriage, to live, because there's other aspects about being, a Catholic Christian, or even being a responsible Christian in general, and one of them is being responsible, being able to live within your means, and not becoming an undue burden to society, yourself, and others. You said about that you were going to look for the staggering statistic of how many Catholic women use birth control. I heard about 98%, and that might be true. I will say this, just like when I meet anybody, I don't ask them, hey, what do you do in your private sexual life? I just don't do that. So for me to say that, I talk to everybody regardless of their religion, regardless of their culture, background, atheists. So when I talk about these issues, I really don't delve unless they start to share or the conversation goes in that direction. I don't really have much of a take on what they use, how they use all the time. I mentioned Depo-Provera earlier, but that's, like I said, that was based on the conversations I've had with women who use those things, or other ways of preventing pregnancy. And a lot of them too, like when condoms are in use, it's mainly for disease purposes. And even a lot of the guys say that too. They're not talking about, well, I don't want to get her pregnant. It's like, hey, I don't want to get AIDS, or hey, I don't want to get gonorrhea or something. That's usually the first thing that has come out of their mouth when they talk about these things. As far as how many Catholic women use birth control, I don't have the exact number. If it could be 98%, it could be 50%. But either way, it goes back to, when you say Catholic women, there are practicing Catholics, there are traditional Catholics, there are progressive Catholics, there are nominal Catholics, meaning they're Catholic, but they haven't gone to church in 20 years. They just say they're Catholic. They haven't accepted another religion. They haven't, in general, they're really not religious, but they're not atheists or really into science either. They just know they were baptized. They had many of them even had their first Holy Communion and received sacraments. And even people who still go to church every Sunday don't even know a lot of them don't know about what the sacraments really mean. So I don't indict Catholicism in relation to the amount of Catholic women that actually use birth control, because in most cases, I know the people I know who don't, the traditional Catholics, they do have more kids than most other families. And then very conservative Catholics, or people who do try natural family planning. Yes, they do it. They do the natural family planning. There's even classes that are out there for it. I know a couple that are not even Catholics, don't even go to church, but they practice natural family planning, and they've been together for years, and they haven't had any children. So it's something that can work, and if people are going to do it, then and like I said, it's not rocket science, and it's not something that requires a great deal or an overwhelming deal of discipline and dedication. Now, you go on to the second paragraph. One of my beefs with the church and the anti-abortion movement is they call themselves pro-life while calling for the U.S. to bomb Iran or jump in the war against Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay, this is where I have to clarify something. You're using the church in a general term. So basically, that's a general way of saying the church, because there are over 1 billion Christians in this world, but that doesn't mean that their churches all agree on the same thing. I can tell you right now that the Catholic Church is not calling for the U.S. to bomb Iran. The Catholic Church is not calling for us to jump into war against Iraq and Afghanistan. The Catholic Church did not cheer for the American sniper and then go campaign in front of Planned Parenthood. Now, that's not to say that some other churches that call themselves Christian didn't do any of the things you accuse of. I could just say there is nothing in the proclamations or doctrine of the Catholic Church that subscribes to any of this, anything in this paragraph. And when you say campaign in front of Planned Parenthood, that sounds a bit of a broad definition in itself. If you're talking about Catholics praying in front of an abortion clinic, okay, that's really not campaigning. That's just people praying. If you're talking about Catholics holding signs, against Planned Parenthood, okay, that's a protest. But as far as this other stuff you're talking about, that's not the Catholic Church that I know. That's not the Catholic Church that I belong to, which is the biggest and most wide Catholic Church of the 22 rites of the Catholic Church, meaning the Latin Rite. So I don't know when you say church, I'm going to assume you're referring to just any Christian denomination that calls itself a church. That's like comparing the Roman Catholic Church to the Westboro Baptist Church of Fred Phelps, who passed away, and I guess his children. You may know them because they hold up the signs at the funerals of fallen service members with signs that say, "God hates fags." Okay, well, I could tell you there's not a single Catholic in that group. So I really can't comment anymore on that as much as I did. As far as using the services of Planned Parenthood in regard to your past, okay, that's really a personal thing. I don't, like I said, that was, you went there. I don't know if you went in there and just took a sex ed class, I don't know, or if you actually took a young lady in there to procure an abortion. But regardless, the issue with Planned Parenthood, okay, for many people, and I think these are fair criticisms. First of all, we do have the Affordable Care Act now. So a lot of things that they cite as a reason for existing outside of abortion will fall under the Affordable Care Act. Secondly, is they have been exclusively, based on what I have been reading, and this is in the mainstream secular press now, they have been given basically primacy over every other clinic, women's health clinic out there. So, there's Planned Parenthood, and then there's like thousands of other clinics that aren't getting the overwhelming promotion and government funding that Planned Parenthood gets. Another thing that I've my understanding, and somebody told me they tried it, and they said this to them at Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood talks about mammograms and how they give mammograms